Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello and welcome to episode 224 of the Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. I am your host, Joseph Arvidsson, and today we are honored to welcome back a distinguished leader in the field, Veronica Cunningham. As the executive director of the American Probation and Parole Association, Veronica has spent the past 9 years shaping the future of community corrections, guiding over 34,000 members in reducing recidivism and advancing impactful practices. Her leadership has been pivotal in advocating for inclusion, ethics, and the modernization of the probation and parole landscape. She's also been at the forefront of spearheading APPA's growth from fund development to training institutes and is a driving force behind the association's vision and mission. In this episode, we will hear about the exciting plans for APPA's Winter Training Institute in Las Vegas, a milestone 50th anniversary celebration in New York City, and the year-long initiatives planned to commemorate this landmark year. We'll also dive into Veronica's insights on emerging trends in the field, the role of international collaboration, and her vision for the future of APPA. This promises to be a dynamic conversation filled with inspiration and actionable takeaways. So stay tuned as we explore how Veronica continues to push boundaries and redefine the field of community corrections. Now please enjoy my conversation with Veronica Cunningham, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, welcome back to the show, Veronica. Thank you for joining us. Once again, you've been on the show in the past, but for those first-time listeners who may not have caught that amazing episode, go ahead and give us a quick introduction to yourself, Executive Director of the American Probation and Parole Association. And then we're going to roll up our sleeves and do a deep dive into some of these amazing questions I want to cover with you, Veronica. But yeah, tell our listeners about yourself, your journey, and sort of what brought us here today.
Absolutely. I am happy. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy talking to you, whether it's on this podcast or in person in The Hague in the Netherlands or wherever we might be. It's so fabulous. So thank you again. I have been doing this work for a very, very long time. I love to tease and say I am 500 years old. I actually ended up in criminal justice quite by accident as a college student. That wasn't my initial major, but one thing led to the other, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to be involved. I want to change lives and things like that. And so fast forward, I ended up not only getting my bachelor's, but also getting my master's in criminal justice. And I started my career in my hometown of New Orleans and started as a probation and parole officer, actually combined in that state's system. And I did that for a couple of years before I moved to Texas. And I worked in the parole system for almost 20 years in the state of Texas. And my last position there was to head the parole system for the entire state of Texas, which was a lot of fun with 77 offices all across that huge state. It kept me really, really busy, but I learned so much and gained so much insight into the people, the work we do, et cetera, and I just grew more in love with it every year. I was on a visit to Chicago, and again, something kind of odd happened, and it was kind of probably a good time for me to make a shift in what I was doing. So I was invited to take on the role as the head of the probation system for all of Cook County, which is Chicago and its surrounding areas. And I did that several years, and then I thought I was retiring. So I began to pretend that I was retiring after some time in Cook County, and one thing led to the other. I did a little work for a small not-for-profit that does supports individuals with criminal records finding jobs. Also did some work for an organization that had a treatment protocol for people suffering from substance addiction. And then I did just a little stint with Vera Institute of Justice in the pretrial demonstration program back in my hometown of New Orleans. And then finally led here at APPA. Been here now for about 8.5 years. And super excited. This is not a part of my journey I thought I would have, but it's also an opportunity for me, having experienced pretrial probation and parole as a practitioner, to take all of that information and support the organization that supports and assists the field of probation and parole, namely, but also we obviously offer some assistance and aid to pretrial staff as well. So yeah, here I am. And again, just excited to be here. Don't know how much longer this 500-year-old woman is going to last, but I'm going to try to keep taking the vitamins and then keep going.
There you go. I love it whenever we connect, Veronica, because we're kindred spirits on so many levels. And to that end, as you were speaking just now and telling everybody your sort of experience in your career trajectory, you said something which caught my attention. And you said early on in your education, you said, I want to help people, which I think sometimes we forget. I know I've talked to folks about this. There's a term we use a lot in corrections with evidence-based practice training. It's that concept of role clarification. In other words, clarifying our roles with our clients to take that ambiguity out of the relationship. But I've been telling people as of late, I think the field of corrections is almost going through some sort of a vocational clarification, that we struggle in hiring and promoting because, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit offline, we don't even have not just one probation and parole system in the United States. I mean, we've got at least 50 probation and parole systems in the United States, and there's no consistency or contact standards or anything like that. I was speaking with an individual from the agency I just retired with, and as you were saying, again, I want to help people. I told them my words of advice for changing agency culture is an expression: hire to the will and train to the skill.
I love it.
So obsessed, for example, looking at someone's resume, and we want to find that applicant who's trained in motivational interviewing, or they've already got a risk assessment credential, because we think, well, we could hit the ground running with this person. But I always argue to anyone who will listen, I can't train someone to be client-centered. I cannot train empathy. I can train risk assessment. I can train case planning. I can train cognitive behavior interventions. But I can't train that person who, as you said, I want to help people. Let's just start there as our baseline of who should get into this field.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll sort of get past this. Mm-hmm. I wear two hats, and sometimes I'm an enforcer, sometimes I'm a social worker. It's like, no, we've really got to, again, go through some sort of vocational role clarification to find out what this field is really all about in these changing times.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how often I say that I wanted to help, but I did, because I remember, and I've shared this story recently. I think I was going into my junior year in college when I decided to switch to criminal justice. And oddly enough, it was because it was that particular time, one of the only summers I spent home during college. And I was home long enough, I was in my neighborhood long enough to see it change. And I'm like, what is going on? And hear my parents talk about being kind of concerned about the neighborhood and what was happening, and drugs starting to come into the neighborhood, and just a lot of things that we had not thought about before, had not been exposed to. And unfortunately, I have to say that one of my brothers also was a part of this change that we saw, this scary change that we saw. And so, conversations with my parents, conversations with other people who were doing work in this space, and social work, et cetera, I say, you know what? I am all about people and all about community, and the buck stops here. And so, yes, while I want to be a writer and I wanted to be a sports writer, to be quite honest with you.
Nice. I love it.
I says, there's something I think more important from the standpoint of just kind of our world, our community, our human beings, and all of that kind of stuff. So I made the switch. I had a friend who was majoring in it, and she started talking to me about some of the classes she was taking and all of those types of things. And then I told my parents, I said, yeah, I'm going to switch gears. And so I actually, my brother was my guinea pig. So before becoming an official probation and parole officer, I was trying to help him navigate the challenges he was having. And fortunately, he got a lot better and ended up being a responsible, law-abiding, tax-paying member of society. And I was so proud of him. And when he passed away a few years ago, because he had changed his life so much from when he was a young 17, 18-year-old doing just stupid things, we dedicated about 300 books that he'd actually read to colleges and universities and schools in the city where he lived. And so he just become a phenomenal human being. And I just think that if given an opportunity and some support, so many people can change. And I love helping to make that change.
Yes, we all have that potential for change. Speaking of which, one of the things you and I are about is getting that field to change. We do that through the American Probation and Parole Association and types of events such as the one this month in Las Vegas, the annual Winter Training Institute. We should clarify, APPA has sort of split that annual event into a winter and summer event now to accommodate more folks. But even though it's just right around the corner, let's go ahead and talk about Las Vegas, the Winter Training Institute. Can you share some of the exciting plans? I know we always have great input and planners around these events. Maybe some keynote speakers, workshops, or just any other special moments that attendees can look forward to if they're going to be in Las Vegas later this month.
Yeah, absolutely. For people who have attended our training institutes in the past, they will find a lot of the usual, and from my perspective, the usual include these absolutely amazing learning sessions, workshops where we have subject matter experts from all across the country, if not the world. And I think we have close to 90 lined up for the Training Institute in the winter. And by the way, a lot of people forget that we also now, since the pandemic, we offer it virtually. So there are a lot of people who can't travel because of funding issues within their respective organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And so they get an opportunity to have access to many of those sessions recorded, and also all of our plenary sessions. They can see them live or see them recorded later. This is the weirdest thing. This is the first time this has happened since I've been at APPA. So we have this absolutely amazing keynote speaker, but we haven't announced that person yet. and I'm from Louisiana, so I'm superstitious. So I'm not gonna announce it until that person's people send me. I forgot they referred to it as the catalog later this week.
All right.
I think if we had been able to announce it earlier, we would have probably got 1 million people to attend the Training Institute. But things happen. But anyway, yeah, I'm just waiting and so anxious about us being able to finally announce the speaker. But in addition to that individual, we have a gentleman, Mr. Gracie, who. He and I started talking about health and wellness. He was introduced to me by the Los Angeles Probation Department. There's a move afoot since a number of POs were killed in the line of duty last year about going to weapons carrying units in all of the probation and parole departments. And, that's for individual leaders in their respective jurisdictions to decide. That's not my decision to make. But I would like to say that I think that, from experience, having served in the field for many, many years in 3 different states, or 2 different states, I should say, I never felt like, oh my God, if I don't have a gun, I'm not ready to go out and do the business of my job as a probation and parole officer. So Mr. Gracie is we're going to start talking more about, let's use this as opposed to, a weapon to deal with the situations as much as we can. And so he's got an amazing program he's working with. It's almost like, it's not quite similar to the old verbal judo thing, but it's along those lines, again, of not not feeling like we need to have a weapon to de-escalate a situation. So he's going to be a very powerful speaker. His program is, is so specific and authenticated and all of those types of things. One of the things we've done in recent years is we've really embraced people with lived experiences. I think that if, in addition to the probation officers who are on the ground running, doing the work, the other people who know more about the system than anybody else is people who have lived it, who have been incarcerated, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to have this amazing gentleman, Adam Clausen is his name. Adam lives in Las Vegas, fortunately, but does Adam have a story? Oh, my God. And it's very compelling. And there's a love story behind that as well, because his wife, who supported him while he was in prison for a lot of years, she talks about it. And often we forget that. We think about just this person with number 2, 3, 4 on their back, right? We don't think about all of the collateral consequences to that, the family members and all of the things that are kind of a domino effect when a person finds themselves on the wrong side of the law. And so she is going to also join Adam. Her name is Roseanne, and she's absolutely amazing. So she'll talk about kind of how she got through it. And she's even created her own group for women, for families, wives and families who find themselves with family members in prison. And it's a compelling story. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's just going to be a lot of great things. A lot of people also don't know we host a judicial roundtable at our winter training institutes. And so that event is for judges only. And we'll have an opportunity for Judge Karen Freeman, who is currently with BJA, but she was a sitting judge in Maryland for many, many years, for probably 20 years on the bench there. She and Judge Rebecca Paloma out of Texas, are going to help facilitate that discussion. And again, it's a judges only perspective. But I also, that's another area that's piquing my interest in wanting to get the judges and parole board members more involved and more at the table with us. They have their separate entities, right, and events and everything. Mm-hmm. We need to be together, because every time I hear someone says, well, that parole officer revoked him or that probation officer revoked her. Right. It's the parole board that makes that decision. They sometimes follow the PO's recommendation. Sometimes they don't. It's the judge that revokes an individual, with few exceptions. There's now some departments that have a little bit more leniency in terms of the tier or level at which that's, that violation or infraction. But by and large, that's the way the system runs. So I really want us to start engaging judges and parole board members more into our conversations. But all in all, it's going to be great. We're going to do a lot of focus around health and wellness, because, again, we often forget the tremendous stress this type of job brings forth to an individual. And I just think that for so many years, we didn't pay enough attention to that. We were very concerned about the client's trauma. We were concerned about the physical harm that could come from a PO, and we should be, all of that. But also just that psychological empathy has to stay front and center for us. And so over the next several years, if you will, we're going to pay close attention to stress and trauma and how we can help officers with their emotional journeys in this work.
I'm so glad you mentioned that individual and did a good job of clarifying, if you will, because I'm not going to lie, Veronica, I read the emails that APPA sends out, announcements, et cetera, and I can recall drinking my morning coffee, and I read that, and in my defense, I was still probably half asleep. But yeah, I was just seeing the stuff about verbal judo, de-escalation, probably something, LA County law enforcement, this or that, and my biases started to kick in. But then I thought, okay, I know Veronica. I know we have the same vision. She's not bringing in Chuck Norris here. There's a method to her madness. So I'm glad you clarified that and said, no, it's really all about using those other things.
Yeah. And you know what? Just last comment for me on that is, when I hear people talk about recently those 4 officers who were killed last year, and now everybody should have a gun. Well, guess what? Each of those 4 officers, 3 I know for a fact, had a gun with them on the day they were killed. Yeah. So, there are other ways that you can try to calm things down and change the trajectory of something that's going to happen. without having to pull a weapon. So that's one of the things that Mr. Gracie is going to kind of talk to us about.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note to attend that session. And to be clear, I'm not armchair quarterbacking tragedies, you know that. But to the point you were making about that recent tragedy, I always take a step back. And again, I mentioned we need to reevaluate really our role. My question was not whether or not the officers, the probation and parole officers were carrying firearms as well. But I thought, when can we get past this? I'm going out on a warrantless pickup search. That's what we have the sheriff's department for. You should be focusing on you're a change agent who has to have that therapeutic alliance.
Yeah.
That's a different, and I know we could go down this rabbit hole all evening.
That's a different topic.
That's a different topic. And we can say, you know what? Yeah, you should hire almost like a probation and paroles department of a community service, not a community service officer, but okay, we only have folks that hire for that role. And there's no blurring the lines of, on Monday, Veronica is my probation officer and she uses her motivational interviewing techniques to explore my ambivalence. But on Tuesday, Veronica's coming out with a sidearm of task force to arrest me. It's like, no, pick your lane. Pick your lane. I'm not saying those roles aren't legitimate, but I'm saying that's the problem is this whole we wear 2 hats, 3 hats, 4 hats. Nope. Let the law enforcement folks do the law enforcement stuff and just farm that out to them or whatever.
And our heart goes out to those officers. I mean, every time I got a call about one incident and then another incident, I'm just like, I found myself weeping. I'm just like, this is terrible. You know, we've been quite fortunate in our field that we don't get many officers killed or hurt in the line of duty, but one is too many, right? So it's just a horrible thing. So I just want us to, and within departments, I want us to do all of the necessary research and gain as much knowledge as we can so we can make really, really informed decisions about what's best for our staff and the individuals that are in the field and how the communities are impacted by all of this, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's talk more about the 50th anniversary of the American Probation and Parole Association. And I know that in addition to celebrating in New York City later this year, and I love this, Veronica, you're planning almost sort of like a micro-dosing every month. We're going to have a little bit of a celebration around the 50th anniversary of APPA starting in January, I believe. So tell the listeners a little about that and what they can sort of look forward to, or they'll recognize the method to your madness here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, there were obviously when you're creating an organization, not just APPA, but any organization, there are steps, so it wasn't just created on that day in the summer of 1975, and then that was it. There was a lot of work that got us to this point. So as a staff, and this has probably been a year since we started talking about this 50th anniversary, we began to think this just shouldn't be a one-day celebration or a 2-day celebration at 2 of the training institute. We should celebrate all year long. And to be quite candid with you, for me, it's not so much about APPA. We are I feel like we're the bowl that holds the gumbo. I'm a girl from Louisiana, so we're just a vessel, right? And all of the stuff that goes into APPA and goes into the field is all about the field of community supervision. So we launched our 50th anniversary website on January 1. So if you go on our site right now, you'll see a little click bar there that you can go in, and we're going to continue to pile on information and fill it in. We're going to do things like honor specific probation officer. We're going to honor people with lived experiences. We're going to honor organizations or agencies that have great programs with excellent success rates. We're just going to do a whole lot of things to really, really get the message. And I think the most important thing for me, probably the most important thing is highlighting the people. But then the second most important thing to me is we're going to launch this year a national public awareness campaign. And I think you heard me mention that when we had the call with Sarah a few weeks ago. I mean, it's just this, who are we? We kind of sort of know who we are, but a lot of people don't. And one of the things I constantly remind people of is there's this huge justice system. And there's so many tentacles or components of that system. Most people know what a judge does. You know, they see the role, they know that's the person in court, that's the person's going to sentence you. They know what a police officer does. He goes to the scene of the crime, et cetera, et cetera. Many of them know what the lawyers do, the public and the prosecutor, public defender and the prosecutor. They're in the court to get the guy leniency, not get him leniency, et cetera. Even the correction officers, people know they work in the jail.
Right.
If you put a room of 100 people in that room and you ask them to write down what a parole and probation officer does, my guess would maybe be 20 would get it right.
Right.
Maybe, and I'm being really being a little liberal here. People don't know what we do, and from my perspective, we have the best chance of changing lives of people who get entangled in the justice system than any other component of the system. Yet, as I always say, we're the least talked about, we're the least funded, people know little or nothing about us, so we want to change that. So we're creating a toolkit because APPA can't do it alone. Because to be quite candid with you, I think it's the responsibility of every single department in this country to have a marketing plan to ensure that the people in their communities know about the value of the work they do in community supervision. But we're going to help them because we're going to share a toolkit with them, a marketing toolkit. And so I just think that it's just, again, a travesty on our part that not more people know about, I call it our work and our worth. And we just have to do a better job of showing that. So we're going to be just all over the country. And by the way, every time I travel this year, I don't think I'll make all 50 states, although with the help of our parole board, of our board members, many of them live in different states. We're going to ask them to put the APPA spin up a ton, try to get some press about it, try to get on a show like yours, a podcast or a news show, an NPR or something like that. We need to make this a whole year about community supervision. And so that's one of the really exciting things about this year that we're going to be doing. A couple of other things, we've never done this before. So, well, let me go back. One of the things I think we have to do a better job of, when I arrived at APPA is the membership association for probation and parole officers, right? And yet, immediately I learned that, while I had been a member for many, many years, I knew about it when I was in Texas, knew about it when I was in Chicago, obviously, et cetera. As I traveled across the country that first year, I was stunned at the number of people who had never heard of APPA. Just shocked. And I get it that most states have some type of local probation and or parole association, but we are your national organization. When my son became a lawyer, he got a letter right away from the National Bar and whatever the other bar is, the American Bar Association. Congratulations, welcome to this bardom, lawyerdom, and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah. And they gave him 1 year free membership in those two associations. Well, guess what? I'm like, we can do that too. So 3 years ago, we started doing that at APPA. We publicized it. It's been on our website. I'll talk about it often at the training institutes. And we still don't have departments registering their staff's name when they complete their first training to be probation or American Probation and Parole Association members their first year. So there's strength in numbers. And I really want us to really push the envelope and try to get as many new members as we possibly can. I'm hearing now we no longer have 100,000 probation and parole officers in the country. It's more like 90,000 since the pandemic. People retired, all kinds of things happen, staffing and all of that kind of stuff. But in my crazy head, I'm still thinking there have got to be 50,000 or almost half of that number that are willing to join as an individual membership. And so what we're doing during the anniversary year, instead of paying $50 for one person, two people get in for $50. So you split it at $25 per person. And we're really, really going to push that. There's so many things that we want to do. And I just think by having the learned knowledge of POs across the country that will help, again, not just move APPA forward, because this APPA is all about moving the field forward, but absolutely to kind of help them. Things like advocacy work and policy work and all of those types of things. So and then the final highlight, I think, for me is, and we did it just as not necessarily as a nod to the 50th anniversary, but every not-for-profit that I know, they have a donate button on their website. Yeah. We've never in the history of APPA had one. And I think one of the messages we don't get out to folks is that APPA is a 501c3. It's a charitable organization. If we don't get members, if we don't make a couple of extra dollars on the Training Institute, if we don't get funding through grants, we don't have an organization. And so we're going to be pushing folks to donate. No amount is too small, so that we can help to kind of build the infrastructure of APPA a lot more, so then we can support and help the field a lot more. So yeah, just a whole bunch of things we're going to be doing this 50th anniversary. And of course, you mentioned New York. That's usually one of our largest training institutes. We're expecting a whole lot of people to be in New York at the beautiful New York Marriott Marquis Hotel, Times Square. And we've got a marquee person already lined up for that one. We'll be able to announce that one closer to New York, that's for sure. But yeah, we're super excited about it.
Well, now, as an attendee and presenter for Las Vegas, I'm going to be looking forward to that special guest announcement. But you're right, Veronica, we really are a vocation in need of a better public relations firm. It reminded me, as you were speaking, I designed an undergraduate course years ago, criminal justice in the media. But when I was looking at other criminal justice players, kind of to your point in the system, everybody knows what the police do. I mean, right? For better or worse. I mean, I'll date myself. I grew up with Starsky and Hutch, Beretta. Thanks to Hollywood, I knew what law enforcement did. And thanks to Hollywood, I knew who Jack McCoy is and the other folks from, Law and Order. Okay, I know what the prosecutor does. But when I was putting this course together, I couldn't even find, in the sort of Hollywood media, TVs, movies, a depiction of a probation officer. There was just like a dearth of representation. So you're right. We're our own worst public relations enemy. And as you know, we only get in the news to celebrate failures. A reporter never called to interview me about an early discharge from probation supervision that I did, or, successfully reintegrating somebody back to the community. It's only the, if it bleeds, it leads kind of stories. But yeah, that's great that we're going to, as you said, give that issue its due diligence and start doing better promotion. And you mentioned Sarah Lewis over in the UK, and maybe we can start doing stuff with her. She's got that same vision over there with her Justice 2.0 and sort of reimagining how people view us. Speaking of which, and I know we're still going to circle back to New York, but kind of along these lines, as we head into 2025, do you see any emerging trends shaping the field of probation and parole? Like, I know there's a lot of talk with technology, and I'm involved in some artificial intelligence presentations and webinars coming up impacting the work, or any other trends you see if someone's just getting into the field and they're thinking, okay, I want to make this my niche. What should I really sort of hone up on to give myself an edge?
Yeah, so look, you hit the nail on the head. Technology is, oh my God, it's probably, I would say AI, and I'm not a big tech person, but I would say AI is probably the fastest advancing was probably advancing faster than any other technology I've ever seen. And it is here. And everybody, I've heard some people recently in our space says, oh, we're afraid of that technology stuff. We're afraid of that AI stuff. Well, we better get unafraid, because it's here and it's not going anywhere. So we got to get on top of all of that. So, and if you know that probably for our executive leadership summit last year now, I can say, we had a couple of sessions on AI, and specialists come in to talk to the executive leaders of community supervision departments about AI. There's some talk about some departments trying some things. I think one example is in Arizona. They've done an assessment to using an AI, and I can't wait to get to some more details about that so we can share it and have them share it maybe in New York at our training institute in terms of how that looks. But technology is absolutely the key. There are so many of our corporate members that I've been speaking to, and I'm not a business person, but one of the things I said to one of the corporate members, this person I consider a personal friend now, I was like, you guys can just sit down and keep offering us what you've been offering us for the last 10, 15, 20 years, but your business is going to shut down So you probably need to kind of get to the powers that be within your respective company to really understand all of the things that are happening in the world of technology in other companies. And some of those are apropos for us as well. So that's a big thing. The good news for me, I think, in terms of trends in the field, people, to our conversation with Sarah, people, I think, are starting to have more candid conversations about what's not working with us. Nobody wants to be told, oh, your probation department is not that good, and oh, your recidivism rates are too low. Again, it's on us. So what are we going to do about it? We need to probably try to see if we could eliminate some of the myths that are out there about our work. We need to be honest about what's working and what's not working, and what's not working. We need to stop expending funds on those things and stop spending time on those things. We need to feel safe having those conversations about the importance of our work and the challenges we face in our work. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think people are finally ready to unpeel the layers of the onion, as they say, let's just get down to it. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's talk about how we fix this. I was really excited, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you the last time we talked, but I was a part of that Reducing Revocation Challenge last year. And that was, to me, and I heard a lot of other people say this, it was really empowering to say, okay, we have not done a good job with this. We have sent a lot of people to prison because they didn't report a couple of times, or we didn't know they were living at the girlfriend's house as opposed to the mother's house, or horribly, this person is addicted to drugs. Now, if a diabetic needs an insulin needle to take care of his diabetes, a person with a terrible substance abuse, not necessarily that I'm saying they need to do the needle route, but there needs to be something. If we're saying diabetes is an illness and we treat that, now we're saying addiction is an illness, we need to treat that. I was so happy to hear from Mike Cimino, who's the head of the Maricopa County Probation Department in Arizona and Phoenix. And they passed some legislation last year, maybe it might have been the year before. Instead of now being, oh my gosh, you just got a positive UA test for this, that, or the other, we're going to take care of you. That's going to be a violation report. It is now a call to action. So this person's got a positive UA. What do we need? Does he need inpatient treatment? Does he need outpatient, et cetera, et cetera? I'm finally seeing the pendulum shift a little bit in terms of us just being open and honest about what we need, what we don't need. Second Chance Act, for example, obviously that money doesn't go to probation departments, but it goes to those social services organizations and not-for-profits in the areas where we have probation and parole officers that work with our clients, right? I was super excited over the last couple of years. A couple of times they needed to get refunded to really push and help and support getting financing and more funding for the Second Chance Act. But I think it's that time. We keep using the word reform, and we keep using the word transform. We talk about reimagination. Those are just words if you're not doing the work. So I think we're finally starting to turn the corner on that, doing the work and having those candid conversations about how we treat people. There's a whole move afoot to talk about being a coach. Yeah. I know some pretty bad coaches. You can ask one of my relatives who was in a professional sports game. Oh my gosh. So I don't care what word we call it. We need to understand that we need to be strength-based, focused in terms of our solutions, and we need to treat people maybe not the way we would want to be treated, because maybe we would want to be treated pretty crappy, but treat people that we would want them to treat our mother or our father, our children. Mm-hmm. And it all amounts to respect. You can't be, to your point earlier, you can't be the mean PO one day, the pistol packing person, and then think the next day this person is going to be, oh, okay, so lovely to see you, Miss Veronica. It just doesn't work like that. Right. So yeah, time to change the tide.
Yep, exactly. And you're right. I think there is something afoot that it's just a time when the stars are lining up, and maybe it's what we've learned from 50 years of experience, or maybe it's an attrition thing where some of the old guard is retiring out and we're bringing in more of the younger, more idealistic, progressive-minded staff member. But yeah, I'm definitely seeing a shift afoot. I know we've been talking about it all evening here, but APPA has always valued knowledge sharing and collaboration. Veronica, what role do you see with international partnerships playing in advancing probation and parole practices in the years ahead? You mentioned The Hague earlier. You and I were there for the World Congress, and you're obviously also aware that I'm a member of APPA's International Relations Committee. So I see the benefit, but what's your vision for that? And does it fit into what we've been talking about as far as eliminating myths and more of a sort of unified outlook of what probation is all about, not just in the States, but globally?
Yeah, well, first of all, and I'm maybe I'm a little biased, I don't know, but I just think that APPA's International Relations Committee is one of the best committees we have. You guys are really having those kind of conversations we talked about earlier, right? About let's just stop faking and shaking and let's really get some real work. Let's talk about what we need to do, et cetera. I remember, and on the same subject of international, we talked earlier about Sarah and their, I can't remember what it's called, something like Taboo to Transformation, or her
Justice 2.0 movement?
Yeah, and in an event that we participated in a couple of weeks ago, something like Taboo to Transformation or something. And I love that conversation. I love hearing a young man who had lived experience, right? Talked about kind of his experience. And he talked about the fact that there are a lot of good probation officers. He says, but I think one of the problems is so many of them are just doing the same thing they used to do 10 and 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's a different day and time. People are different. The resources are different, et cetera, et cetera. So I think by us having conversations with people, not just those of us who live here in the United States of America, but live in other countries, we can learn. A perfect example of that is Holland, for example. I think it was Sarah who mentioned that Holland had a public perspective or some type of campaign. Mm-hmm. And she says when that campaign was over, things really, really changed. They were able to kind of reduce their jail population or their prison population because they changed so many attitudes.
Yeah.
And so I really think that it's important for the public to have a perspective of what we do and some of the barriers to reintegration for the individuals. And so I really, really, really think that it's important for us to kind of attach ourselves to learning more about what's happening in other places. Something that I think it would be difficult for the United States to do, not impossible, but difficult, is, as you know, in Japan, they have volunteer POs. Yep. And this entire year that I've been hearing, or 2 years now, I've been hearing about the scarcity of POs and not being able to hire POs and all of those types of things. It would be remarkable. Maybe it needs to start off in a really small space, but it would be remarkable for departments to start trying to bring people in as volunteers. They don't necessarily have to go out into the field, but if they can do some of the work internally, maybe even some of the paperwork, so then that would lend the time to POs to do the connections they need to make with the individuals who are on supervision. So I think Japan has a lot to teach us about that. Yeah. I have decided on my own, I want to learn more about it. So I'm going to personally fund my own trip to Japan, maybe later this year, so that I can spend a week or so there with them. I've already talked to the folks there. Just really want to understand how this works for them. And the reason I say, of course, it might be a little different and tough for Americans is the culture is different. In Japan, they respect their elderlies to the 5 millionth degree, right? And so it's a little different here. So I know there would be some challenges, but I think there's some components that will absolutely be able to work with us.
I'm aware of that practice in Japan. Indeed, I probably attended some of the same sessions you have over the years, Veronica, hearing those people speak. And to your point, the culture is a little bit different, and they do rely on a lot of their senior citizen population to do that volunteering. But as you spoke, and you were saying this on the heels of, it was Cam Stevens was the gentleman in Sarah's webinar who speaks of his lived experience. And I started thinking, why don't we kill two birds with one stone here? I've learned, one of the concepts I've learned in my crash course on desistance from crime is this notion of generativity. And that's really what tertiary desistance is about, is when the individual doesn't just stop offending and it's beyond assuming that new identity, but the journey is complete when they experience this generativity, this giving back. If I can help just one kid not walk the pathway I walked, or give back to my community for the damage I did, that's sort of what seals the deal. But I thought, well, why don't we tap into that lived experience population? Because then they're giving their insights, but we're also helping them, as I said, sort of fulfill this final piece of their desistance journey by giving back. And then it's not people with graduate degrees that grew up in the suburbs like me trying to tell someone, trust me, the Canadians say this will work. It's no, young man, I've walked this pathway. This is how I navigated that field.
When we first started, so going a little bit off of the international subject, when we first started this conversation, we were talking about kind of how people, you got to get the right people in these jobs. Mm-hmm. And I would say to you, I don't know, it probably has some to do with having a person in my family who was caught up in the system. But it also, I was just like, when I spoke to my clients, to that example you just gave, if a man was a father, a parent, I would talk all day long about that, about you have a son and boy, I know you want to be proud of him one day, et cetera, et cetera. You just got to kind of get into a space where the people are. We can't sit with our little tablet with the pen on it and write, You got to be comfortable enough to have conversations with people, not get too personal, and certainly not overstep your bounds, as they say. But and I remember many times I had clients who would say, you know what, Miss Veronica, you're right. I don't want my children to be like me. And I want them to see a better me. So you're right. You listen, and I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to do. So you just got to keep that kind of conversation going with individuals.
There is a lot of emerging research coming out to that point you made, that a little bit of that self-disclosure goes so far in cementing that therapeutic relationship. And as you said, where I'm not talking about, here's the address where my kids go to school. Right. But saying stuff like, oh, I remember raising a teenage daughter, it was hell. Or, oh, yeah, I trafficked us. I mean, anything that sort of tears out that otherism, that sort of us, they, like, well, you're different than me. Like, nope, we're all the same. Again, my wife nags on me for this, or traffic is bad, or my boss gets on my nerves too, or anything that shows, again, that sort of connection, that vulnerability, that self-disclosure really does go a long way.
It does. And I've had clients say to me, well, Ms. Veronica, you don't understand my life. Oh, but yes, I do. And, while I would give him my brother's name and his probation number, I said, I have a brother who did such and such a thing, and this is what, and like, really? Oh, I never would have thought. I said, what do you think, probation and parole officers, we came out of the sky and flying away, and we're just these angelic people, and we have perfect lives? No. We live like you guys do. But international, I think it's fantastic that we're making a connection. Again, we just can't live in a vacuum here in the United States and think everything we do is perfect and we have all of the answers, because the data doesn't reflect that. So I think it behooves us to extend our learnings and our knowledge to other places and ask questions and be a part of those conversations. I also love, obviously, with Julie, who's the head of that committee, what Julie Trishelle is doing in terms of the SAW project. And I'm on her board of directors and super thrilled and honored to be a part of that, because I think, again, that other countries can learn from us and we can learn from them. And speaking of other countries, I have been tapped by my church to go on a mission trip to Senegal next month. And I am responsible for developing the curriculum where we talk about people who have criminal convictions. And we're going to be talking to them, I should say, not about them, to them. As a matter of fact, we're going to be visiting a prison, a women's prison. And guess what? These women have their young children with them there at the prison. So can you imagine a woman spending 5 years in prison, and her baby was an infant at the time. And then when she goes home, the child is 5 or 6 years old. They don't know her. There's no bond, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's just absolutely amazing, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that.
Wow, I love that. I'm looking forward to those updates from Senegal. We can move on from the international topic, but lest there are any listeners who will be in Las Vegas for APPA, you mentioned the International Relations Committee. I will be co-facilitating a training event in Las Vegas with Juliana Carbonaro, who is flying all the way over from Romania to join us. Yes. So if there's listeners thinking, well, that sounds interesting, but what could we possibly have in common with international probation officers? And or are surprised to learn, holy cow, there's POs in Bucharest? Yes, there are. They're around the world. Yeah. So yeah, if you're in Las Vegas, I'll be speaking with Juliana. So come check out that International Relations Committee sponsored event.
Yeah, that's awesome. She and I exchanged emails just a few days ago, so I'm looking forward to seeing her. But I guess we saw her in the Netherlands, so yeah, great to see her.
She's one of my favorites. Yeah, I saw her even more recently when we trained together in Barcelona. But
nice. Very nice. That's fantastic.
She's another one of those global movers and shakers, so it's good to have her on our team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we like to stay forward focused in probation and parole. Looking ahead, is there anything on the horizon, Veronica, or maybe something afoot that you're really excited about for 2025 or what the practitioner can maybe look forward to?
Yeah. Oh, my God. A lot of stuff. But I would say probably the two most important things to me would be there is really a huge move afoot to ensure that women receive the respect and support they need to do this job. This used to be a male-dominated field. That is no longer the case. There are more women who work as community supervision officers than there are men at this point. And so, as you know, a couple of years ago, we began the Women's Symposium, and we have them at the Summer Training Institute. It's gotten better every year. We just finished our third symposium in Indiana in June. And so we really want to kind of really push that voice, and really get women to be honored. I was telling someone recently that when you look at all of community supervision, and while we are the majority, it's not reflected in the leadership roles of the organization. It's still predominantly men who run probation and parole departments as commissioners, chiefs, directors, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to change that. The other thing that I'm super excited about, and I think is going to be supremely impactful to the field, is the fact that APPA just published its first standards ever for the field of community supervision. Oh, when I tell you, my goodness. So I remember, again, being just a member of APPA and asking that question as well. Is there an accreditation process or a credentialing process, or do we have standards, et cetera, et cetera? And get no to all of those answers. I thought, when I applied for this job and was selected, I thought, there we are. So I know that there were wonderful human beings prior to my coming on board as the executive director of APPA who were maybe just volunteers, but they said, let's do something about this. Let's get some standards going. So there had been a couple of different quote unquote work groups. And I think the last one was probably about 15 years ago. So probably in 2000, it must have been in 2016 or so, 2017, I was at the pretrial conference, NAPSIS conference, and they were unveiling their most recent, because they've had standards for some time, they were unveiling their most recent standards. And I was sitting there talking to a representative from the National Institute of Corrections. And I began to share my concern that we didn't have that for community supervision. I said, I know it's a humongous task, but if we're able to kind of start the process, would NIC support us? And after several conversations and phone calls and emails and all of that, NIC says, we're here to help. And so they funded the first two phases of it. We started in 2020 and just finished just before we went to Indiana last summer with some amazing human beings from across the country that work in community supervision departments. So we have the standards, but we're not going to leave it there. So what happens next is, first of all, we know any of us can read the same document and we all interpret it differently, right? So we want to make sure that people are interpreting the standards in the way that they were intended to be interpreted, that the evidence-based practices underpinnings of the standards are clear for people. So I'm now working on trying to get some additional support from not just NIC, but a couple of other entities to help us with the implementation phase. Well, let me back up. NIC has already agreed to support the organizational development piece, which will bring us even more information about the standards. And I think that what comes out of that will be a lot of help for us as we move to implementation. Ultimately, we want to have an accreditation process.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm hoping that beginning the summer of 2025 through the summer of 2026, we're going to offer training on the standards across the country. Maybe we're thinking about maybe 5 different trainings. People would come from adjoining states. Say, for example, if it's here in Chicago, people would come from Minnesota and Milwaukee and Indiana and all of the states that are very nearby, Collier counties and states, et cetera. And then, so we'll do that. But then again, as I said, ultimately, what I would really like us to do is be able to create an accreditation process. And so we've been talking to the American Correctional Association about what that looks like. We know they've been doing accrediting for many, many years. Whether or not there will be any formal partnership with ACA and APP or not, I don't know that. But we know that right now they're the creme de la creme or experts in that area. So starting to gain as much knowledge about it as possible for them. But yeah, ultimately, I think that I love one of the things Bill Burrell, you know Bill Burrell. I heard him say many, many times, he says, look, we keep referring to ourselves as a profession, but we don't have accreditation, we don't have certification, we don't have license, we don't have any of those things which most professional organizations require of their members, right? Require of the people who work in those fields. So we're going to try to get to that. I don't know that I'll be here to see that through, but I think I'm so thankful that I'm able to get us started along that way. And because I think it will make us more of a professional field and industry. It will also ensure that we are really connected to evidence-based practices, because that will be the standard, if you will, that we'll use the standards to support the evidence and vice versa. So yeah, that's for me, the women's movement, if you will, and getting the standards done. I consider both of those things just the highlights of my career.
Yeah, both very noble. I was talking to Bill Burrell in some exotic city, but we were talking about these standards, and he was using the metaphors that he uses to make his point. And he was saying, for example, yeah, I won't let a plumber come into my house or an electrician. Well, I do let them in my house, rather, because I know they all operate under certain standards. I don't have to see the guy's credentials because I just know. But probation, parole officers who are supervising some of the highest risk individuals in our community aren't operating under any type of unified standards. It would just, I think, blow the layperson's mind if they knew how much of a sort of wild, wild west. Not to say that there's not, of course, amazing pockets of brilliance and good, but yeah, we just need to get on the same page with this for the sake of those we serve and our stakeholders in the community. We really do.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Veronica Ballard Cunningham, Executive Director of the American Probation and Parole Association. Veronica, you always put a smile on my face. I'm looking forward to when we connect again in Las Vegas, if not sooner. Veronica, thank you for all the great work you do, and keep up the fight. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for everything that you do. Really, really is so appreciative. Thank you for everything.
All right. Take care, Veronica.
All right. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up another insightful episode of the Criminologist Podcast. A huge thank you to Veronica Cunningham for joining us and sharing her invaluable perspective on the incredible work happening at the American Probation and Parole Association. From the groundbreaking efforts of APPA's International Relations Committee to the drive for unified standards in the probation profession, it is clear that Veronica and her team are paving the way for a brighter future in community corrections. We also touched on the inspiring work of Dr. Sarah Lewis and her Justice 2.0 initiative in the United Kingdom, and I could not be more excited about the possibilities of collaboration with her movement. Bridging ideas across borders is how we continue to evolve and innovate in this field. Don't forget about the upcoming APPA Winter Institute in Las Vegas, an event you won't want to miss. Check the episode description for links to learn more and register. And of course, APPA's 50th anniversary celebration promises to be a year-long commemoration of everything this organization has accomplished. and everything it will continue to achieve in the years to come. Veronica's vision to honor this milestone is truly inspiring, and we look forward to seeing it unfold. We'll be back next time with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you can reach out through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training, presentations, or consultations on evidence-based practices, implementation, or, of course, our innovative TIDES supervision model. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, feel free to email us at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. And remember to follow us on social media, our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast are regularly updated with new content. You don't want to miss out. You can also find us on X at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. Go ahead and give us a follow. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
Yet, as I always say, we're the least talked about. We're the least funded. People know little or nothing about us. So we want to change that. So we're creating a toolkit because APPA can't do it alone. Because to be quite candid with you, I think it's the responsibility of every single department in this country to have a marketing plan to ensure that the people in their communities know about the value of the work they do in community supervision.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.